Hello, and thank you for being here to hear about my journey as an aspiring leader this year. My name is Alyssa Sim. I am in pursuit of my administrative certification as well as my doctorate in educational leadership. In this presentation, I will talk to you about some of my key experiences during my internship and also how the standards align in each of these experiences and my leadership moves and subsequent impact. Before we begin, just a little bit of background on the district and school. I completed my internship at Olympic View Elementary in Federal Way School District. Federal Way is the #1 most diverse school district in the state. Here at Olympic View, we have 448 scholars with a large Hispanic population at 46%. There are 41% of scholars receiving ELL services, and 80% qualify for free and reduced lunch. To be responsive to the needs of our scholars, Olympic View is committed to growth in anti-racist teaching and leading practices as we gain an understanding of our own racial equity journey and what it means to provide inclusive instruction. Here's an image of our building focus poster. I know this is a lot, but I'm going to pull out a couple of key things. This poster emphasizes some district-aligned strategic strategies as well as indicators from our CEL 5D framework. Some key components include increasing scholars' social emotional efficacy, as well as building capacity around PLC work for our staff. Some guiding questions that I reflected on throughout my year include, what do we need to learn, unlearn, and relearn to address the facilitation of an inclusive and rigorous academic environment? And what is the impact of our racial identity on our organization and the scholars that we serve? So now I'm going to dive into some of my bigger key experiences throughout this year and include some snapshots of evidence in connection to our NELP standards. To start off, one of the largest experiences I engaged in this year was creating the MTSS team. This bridged together the academic RTI and PBIS Tier 2 and 3 teams together. This was a big task this year because each team had already existed and they had their own siloed mission and culture. Additionally, I've been working to overcome the barrier of misconceptions around the RTI and intervention framework, specifically the referral or onboarding process. I strategically picked out a couple of pieces in alignment to our school goals. So my first leadership move was to address the misconceptions and siloed teams by renorming the team to create a common vision, which was in alignment to our school goals. We were really focused on equity and the 4 agreements, which you can see in our norms and mission statement. This work, however, was not done as an individual. I didn't make these agreements and push them out to the team, but I leveraged voice from the entire team in this process. And this addressed NELP Standard 1 of mission and vision. To begin our work and make the new mission of MTSS clear, I began the year with mini MTSS brainstorming sessions where I actually brought the MTSS team into PLCs to discuss our currently most emergent scholars. These sessions focused on instructional strategies and inclusive practices, addressing NELP Standard 4 of learning and improvement. Following these sessions, I asked teams to engage in a survey to determine next steps for the MTSS team, addressing NELP Standard 2 of ethics and professional norms. Each meeting, I led the team in scholar intervention cycles with 6-week check-ins. However, about halfway through the year, I began to notice disproportionality in scholar referral and onboarding processes. Specifically, our white scholars were being over-referred by our teaching staff, while our Tier 2 system data noticed a more emergent need for a Hispanic subgroup. So this work was addressing NELP Standard 3 of cultural responsiveness. Based on this data, I brought the work to the Guiding Coalition, then to MTSS, and finally the staff as we engaged in conversations around implicit bias and systemic racism. This work was around NELP Standards 3 and 7, building professional capacity and cultural responsiveness. This has in turn influenced the conversations in our MTSS sessions as I open each of our meetings with an equity-based opener and conversation. Impact of these efforts is evident in our academic achievement data. This is a big hefty spreadsheet, but basically it's the Tier 2 intervention data that MTSS leverages through our reading intervention cycles. This data is focused on 4th and 5th grade scholars that are currently showing a need for emergent intervention that we address through an equity lens. While this year was my internship year, I've spent several years as the PBIS team lead, and this work has culminated into not only a rich familiarity with the team, but an opportunity to extend systems that we've already developed. When I took over the leadership team or the PBIS team in 2019, our TFI scores saw a huge leap of growth, as you can see in this chart. Since then, I have led the team to graduate a tier each year until we finally reach tier 3 implementation. I'm currently leveraging tier 2 and 3 implementation as part of our MTS system, and I'm serving as a coach to our PBIS tier 1 leads. This addresses NELP Standard 7 as it's building professional capacity in our new leads. In my time as a PBIS lead, I created systems like the behavior flow chart, character trait of the month recognition, incentive plans, and intervention matrices. This addresses NELP Standard 6 of operations and management. However, one of my biggest passion projects has been the attendance outreach program through the check-in, check-out system, and this is also embedded into MTSS. I noticed through our data that our Pacific Islander scholars were most severely impacted by attendance barriers. So I intentionally placed interventions here to support these communities. Evidence of leadership impact is that in just a few months of implementation, I put a box around scholars that have already been graduated and gradually released off of the check-in. This work addressed NELP standards 5 and 6 of community and also operations. Another piece of evidence of impact has been scholars being positively recognized across the building, as evidenced by our PBIS rewards points. PBIS rewards is our positive recognition program. So it's essentially a token system where they're being recognized for showing our 3 expectations. This chart shows I implemented a PBIS points push starting in May because we saw a big dip in our positive recognition rates. So I implemented a points push, and May is not over yet, but we've already seen a huge leap of positive recognition occurring. The PBIS systems at Olympic View have grown exponentially over the last couple of years, and I am happy to say that scholars are now recipients of more comprehensive and meaningful tiered supports and behavior. Moving into racial equity lens work, I hope that throughout this presentation, it has been and it will continue to be clear that I have passionately led for anti-racist leadership. And this passion is not siloed, but it is a through line through all of my leadership moves. One of my favorite experiences this year has been my own personal journey in anti-racist leadership and racial understanding. My journey has included plenty of reflection, readings, and trainings through Courageous Conversations. I have applied this personal growth to my professional work and actions as a leader. My goal is to use my positioning as a white woman to advocate for anti-racist teaching, empower the voices of people of color, and provide educators the tools to examine their implicit biases and explore the impacts of their own racial identities. One consistent way that I have shown my commitment to racial equity is through the use of data as a foundation for conversations and reflection. One piece of data that I've frequently brought to our staff has been the PBIS rewards data that I mentioned previously. This data gives us a new lens on, instead of just looking at discipline, it's now looking at positive recognition and that proactive lens of how often we're positively recognizing scholars. I bring this data to staff on a regular basis, and we facilitate conversations with Courageous Conversations about race, compass, and the agreements. This work is aligned to NELP Standard 1 as it is alignment to our mission and vision in equity. Through the regular use of this data, I've had PLC teams reaching out to me to obtain PBIS rewards data that's specific to their PLC lens. And this addresses NELP Standard 2 of professional norms. Based on this work and noticings in our data, we also have really intentional action planning in anti-racist teaching. So I've organized PD around inclusive practices in our educational settings and leveraging our instructional framework, SELF-5D. Most recently, I focused on classroom environment and culture indicators and student engagement, addressing NELP Standard 4 of learning and instruction. Evidence of impact has been clear as our academic achievement and behavior and social emotional data. However, this screenshot shows a third grade PLC team, one of the PLC team leads that came to me for their disproportionality data. And they decided to use this data as a regular piece of data that they track in their PLCs. So after, I want to say like 2 or 3 months of conversations with their PLC team, this was their most recent pull of data where disproportionality in positive recognition for PBIS rewards has significantly improved for our Black and Hispanic populations. Moving into instructional leadership, I had 3 big learning experiences. That was PLC coaching, PD development, and learning walks. Beginning with our PLC work, I was placed in a specific PLC team that had a breakdown in communication, trust, and accountability. It was experiencing some dysfunction, so I was intentionally placed here to act as a coach. They were not familiar with an effective PLC structure, and their meetings mostly consisted of developing a week at a glance. During my time working with the PLC team, I started at the very foundation. I led the team through a renorming protocol and developed a mission statement while keeping conversations about trust and accountability at the forefront, addressing NELP Standard 2 professional norms. We then engaged in backwards planning as I modeled the use of our school-wide backwards planning template with our guaranteed and viable curriculum, addressing NELP Standard 4 of learning and instruction. I emphasized regular use of data with an early data wall and our CFAs to track reading levels and work towards our standards. Based on this, we generated action steps and instructional strategies. I introduced the team to a note catcher agenda guide that I actually developed a couple years ago for all of the PLC teams to use. This guide emphasizes all 4 of DeForest's questions to make sure that we're addressing each one of those and leveraging data. Finally, I began to gradually release the leadership responsibilities back to our PLC team. They now value shared leadership as each member of the team takes on a pivotal part of the agenda, and there's no longer one PLC lead, but they all take on that responsibility together. It's more of a cohesive and collective unit now. And this work impacted student growth as indicated by pre and post assessment data. This data was from the very first implementation, like pre-data before they started instruction, and then just halfway through the first unit of instruction, and their scores doubled. So this is not the end of instruction, but about halfway through. And this addressed NELP Standard 7 of building professional capacity. I've also engaged in learning walks and labs for the last 6 years. In the last 2 years, I've had the opportunity to plan these professional developments and model a lesson where I engaged in feedback protocols and using our curriculum and instructional. This year, I facilitated learning walks that have been focused on remote instruction, specifically around student engagement and formative assessment. This was an indicator most teachers chose as an area of growth in the move to remote learning. After the learning walks, we came together and I led discussions on noticings, wonderings, implementation, and positive feedback that we could leave the teachers that we observed. This addresses NELP Standards 4 and 6. In conjunction with the learning walks, I also planned and led professional development based on the data from these walks. For example, professional development around student engagement and formative assessment aligned again to the indicators our building shows as a focus. As the technology integration coach for the last few years, I also developed PD for families around technology access and support. This was especially helpful this year as we were in remote learning. Evidence of impact from the professional development has been positive reflections from staff as I sent out surveys after professional development, and generally positive, but when there was feedback for improvement, I made a point to implement that feedback as next. Okay, now all my work this year has been grounded in the vision of the district and our building. Some of the key themes this year have been, that have been overarching my year has been leveraging the self-ID framework, ensuring we have culturally competent PD, safe learning environments, building teacher capacity and